Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. And a few days ago, I saw a movie called Queen and Slim, and I'm going to give you my thoughts. For the most part, non-spoilery. I will let you know when I am getting to spoilers. Let you know my thoughts after the jump. So real quick, if you haven't already, go ahead and like, share, subscribe to the channel. Ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be one of the first to know about it. We are on that road to 100. We climbed up a little bit yesterday. Let's keep that going. Once we get there, we'll start doing some fun stuff in the channel and giving some stuff away. All right. Now, on to my review. So if you're here clicking on this review and you've seen the trailers for it, you know that the general premise of the film is two folks, a young man and a young woman, both African American, go on what was the worst first date of their lives, essentially. And know that they get into an altercation with the police, and the police officer winds up dead, and they end up on the run. That is the premise of Queen and Slim, in a simplistic form. And I gotta say, this is a gorgeous, beautiful, gut-wrenching film that I think people of all races should see. So I'm going to get into my likes. My likes, I feel like this is very, very authentic, raw, and visceral film to watch. Unlike something like Green Book, which I'll use as my counterpoint example, is that Green Book is very Hollywood style. It's got a sheen. It feels comfortable. It feels like, oh, I'm okay to see this. Where this is raw, gritty. It feels like people of the ilk of the characters that are in this film are the ones behind the camera. A city like Ohio feels different than Georgia. That jazz club that they go to feels lived in. You feel the sweat on those folks. You feel like, okay, these guys are on the run, but this is their moment of just kind of having that free free to be themselves type of part. So each part feels like a different city. Each part feels like this is what Florida feels like, and this is what you would do in the slums of Florida or the slums of wherever else they end up at. So I think that this feels like a very authentic and realistic portrayal of the entire run that they go on, and everything feels very lived in. Also, I think this is probably one of the best visual representations of what it feels like to be behind the wheel of a car as a black man in America. And while it may not always be the case, I do think that there are times what we feel in our brain, that tensity, the second that we're pulled over. It doesn't matter the race of the cop that's on there. This is what it feels like to be under the gun. And yeah, we might say some smart things. We may do some things here and there, but there is a difference in the way that officers react to people of color than it is to non-people of color. And I think that is displayed perfectly here. I think the two leads have amazing chemistry together. It's really good that they are on two. What makes this film work is the two of them have two different types of ideology, and because they have those two different versions of ideology, as they kind of come closer together, and what it is they each stand for on both sides sort of merges in together, and you get the sense of legacy and leaving their mark, but not for reasons that you think, and not how you think it should be done. And I think it's done beautifully. I think the young lady, Daniel, we already know about. We've seen him in Get Out and stuff. But the young lady is phenomenal, not only to look at, but she is talented, and the two of them have a spark that gives this film, while the visual stuff is gorgeous to look like, it's one of the more gorgeous shots films that I've seen as a road trip ever. It gives that relationship such more of a palpable feel. Sometimes it's the way the two of them look at each other in silence is brilliant. I think what's important, and I know this will get people who are not of the black community a little upset. By just seeing the trailers, they may think they're going to be represented in one way or another. I'll say this film does a very good job of saying that there are bad people, quote unquote, on all sides. There there are bad people that are of the black community. There are bad people of the white community. There are bad people of the police community, and there are good people of the police community. There is no blanket monolith of who's bad and who's good in this film, and I think that dichotomy between everyone helps make this a more fleshed out film, as opposed to saying these guys are bad, these guys are good. It's more of a, this is the world we live in, and this is how we have to navigate through, all of us, to kind of get where we are. Now, granted, this is a fictional story. It's a fictional piece going through that story, but the threads that are there all are showing you that there's a world that this is what we live in. And sometimes it's hard to do that when you're of a race that is not supposed to be, quote unquote, the majority. The last, what really hit home to me, this film does a good job of having comedy, a romantic story, a road trip, a crime road trip, a la Bonnie and Clyde. And there are some intense moments in this when these characters are put under the gun, literally, and then when they're on the run, there are moments of suspense that are really well done for a first-time director. Kudos to you. What I will say that I think the biggest sticking point for this film in the likes category is that there is this overriding theme of legacy and family, and that is the kind of the overriding arc of the film. And I think it does a really good job of doing that. There are moments that they have where there's a great sequence about them talking about babies and where they come from, that kind of hints towards legacy and family. And then there's lines that hit me so hard about, as long as I look good in the eyes of the lady that I love, then I'm okay. And I'm like, oh, I'm a romantic at heart. So that hit me. I loved it. So let's go ahead and talk about the dislikes. There's only a couple for me. One of them, it's a silly dislike. It's one of those ones where my brain was just like, wait, what? These guys consistently are given addresses and directions to where to go. One of the first things that they do smartly is to lose their phones and their GPSs so that no one can contact them or find them or locate them. But that also means that they can't locate things easily, or shouldn't be able to. They never stop for a Thomas guide. There's no map. There's no compass. They just pull up the addresses that they get and know exactly where they're going. Some don't even have houses attached to the address. It's just a location or a spot to go to. Look, I don't know about you, but if somebody gave me an address and said, go here, and I'm just driving around for an hour, I'm going to just go drive to the police and be like, yo, I give up. I don't know where I'm going. So it's one of those ones where you're like, all right, I'll go along with it, but it's a little bit of a disconnect. Kind of like, if you seriously think about how these guys keep going from place to point A to point B, I don't know how they do it. And two, my other really dislike, look, there are some things in the back half of this film, maybe throughout the film, but mostly in the back half of this film, and I don't want to go into spoilers yet, that are unrealistic. And I don't want to say specifically why. You'll see what happens and what I'm speaking of when it does, but there are some things that you just have to dispel, like get rid of disbelief. Like you have to be in the movie and just accept these characters and what they're going through, as opposed to saying the logic of what happens. Because there's some things that happen at the tail end of this film, and you're like, wait, that wouldn't happen that way. I call BS. It bothers some more than others. People are like, oh, that's not realistic. I don't quite go into movies with the idea that everything has to be 100% factual and realistic and like, oh my God, this needs to be 100% true, especially when you're dealing with fictional characters. So it doesn't bother me, but I can see how people, especially people of the law, would be like, seriously, really? That's what you're doing? Those are my only real problems or dislikes with the film. So if you've ever been to the channel, I do my grading system on a once is enough, play it again, Sam, or I never need to, or give me a time stone and I never need to see this film again. For me, play it again, Sam. I've only felt this way about a movie one other time this year, and that was for Jojo Rabbit. Those are my probably top two films of the year. This would be one of them. That would be the other. I walked out floored. It was a great journey to go on to. You don't really see that many films starring us, by us, with us that can resonate for me in that way. But that leads me to where I'm going to slightly deviate from what I normally do for reviews. You already know how I feel. I love it. It's a great movie. You should see it. I don't care what race you are. You should see this movie. There's been a bit of a backlash from the black community for this film, labeling it as, I believe the term was trauma porn, which is something that I've never heard before. It's one of those woke phrases that I guess people have now used to create a new category of film. Whatever. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, which is great. So let me give a little backstory. I went to see this film on Wednesday. Today is the day of recording. This is Friday. And I text my buddy E-Man at E-Man Movies Reviews. What's up, E? And I said, he asked me a while ago to say when I was going to see it to let him know. So as I'm about to head into the theater, I give him a message like, yo, I'm heading into the theater now. He's like, cool, let me know what you think when you get out. Bet. And then he follows it up with, because there's been mixed reviews. And I'm like, wait, what? And I don't look at reviews or notes before going into a movie because I want to go in with my own ideas. I don't want to go in with a preconceived notion of what I think I'm going to see. So I quickly looked at Rotten Tomatoes to see what the scores were, and they were both high. One was 86, I think, or something like that for the critics, and then it was in the 90s for fans. And I'm like, wait, mixed where? And he's like, no, from the black community, from the average moviegoer, it's been some backlash. I'm like, okay, cool. Closed my phone, didn't think anything of it, watched the movie, loved it. And then I didn't even remember that because I was so enamored with the film. And I was starting to write my notes of what it is I wanted to talk about and what I loved with this movie. And then I saw an article that said that this was essentially trauma porn for some blacks. Look, there is no one keeper for what the black community wants or should see. So I cannot tell another black person how they should feel in reaction to a film. What I am going to say is this. Art, film, music should be able to do everything. And we're in this weird time now with black cinema that is in this new era that is gestating where we are now allowed to do a little bit of everything. We have movies like Loose and The Last Black Man in San Francisco and Ma and Don't Let Go and Waves, which on a side note, I know outside of Queen and Slim, none of you have seen any of those films. Maybe Ma, because it was a higher released horror film, but I know for a fact I was the only person in that theater who saw Loose. So it's clear that you're picking and choosing the higher profile films to have these think pieces on. But that's another subject for another day. What I will say is we want to have all of those different types of films because we are not a dichotomy. And I mean, we are not a monolith. We are many things at many times in many places. American cinema has mostly been white for the entire time that it's existed. And in that time, they've been able to do films like Heat, The Town, Natural Born Killers, Bonnie and Clyde, which this film holds a lot of parallels to. They've been able to do that for ages. And we're going to get into spoilers here. They've been able to do that for ages, and no one has complained about the ending of those characters' fates within those films. Why? Because it's not that big of a deal. It's art. It's a fictional story. And we are in a very dangerous time where we're starting to police African American cinema so tightly that we'll never be able to get to the realms and the ways that we need to get to achieve fantastic cinema. For a movie like Heat, which everybody pretty much regards as a high film, if that was the exact same done by black people, we would have a think piece about black people saying, I don't know why we have to watch cops kill a black person on film. Guys, it's film. And and that's the way that these directors and these writers chose to tell their story. Is it trauma porn? No, it's a film. It's cinema. You can't separate the two. There's an underlying issue for you. But here's my thing. This is the biggest thing that I can say and take away for this. If you if we're in this new birthing situation of black cinema and we no longer wanted just slave films, which I am so glad that those are not all we're getting. But if we get movies like Hidden Figures, let's whack them all and take that down because it's a white savior. If we get movies like Green Book, which I did not like, but it exists. If we get movies like that and we're like, that's too whitewashed. Cool. But if we get this, 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 and we keep whacking them all, what we're going to get to be what you're comfortable with as black cinema is going to be that small. It's going to be super finite, which is not fun to watch. If everything comes out the exact same, we're going to have an issue. And it's not just us. Asian Market did the exact same thing with Crazy Rich Asians. They only had like 1 or 2 films that got mainstream appeal. I don't know why we keep actively trying to negate or beat down these different variations of films that we get. We need to have variety. We need to have something for everyone. If you choose not to see this film because it will spark rage or some type of visceral reaction to you, or you can consider it to be trauma porn, just don't see it. But don't go out of your way to try and create this sandstorm to bring down what is arguably one of the best films of the year, because you have an agenda to stand on. Black cinema is not just one thing. You don't need to, and everything doesn't have to be The Wood or Black or Best Man. There has to be, like I said earlier, Waves and Loose, which aren't clean. They don't always make you feel good, but that is what film is supposed to do. And so I just ask that if you have a problem with this movie, cool. You don't have to like it. You have some dislikes. There's some realistic aspects of the film that just don't work. Talk about those. You have a right to say it. Like, you have 100%, that is accurate. You have 100% a right to say that. Let's be careful of saying what dictates or what should dictate what black cinema is, because again, if we get to a point where we only are getting one type of thing, that's going to get old real fast, and we'll be right back where we're like, all we're getting is slave movies. And we don't want that either. Side note, if you haven't seen Last Black Man in San Francisco, Loose, or Waves, let's hold up on the think pieces and let's go see all the other black films too, because they also need to be supported and not just the ones that deal with violence. But that's it for now, guys. If you want, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We have a podcast by the same name that is on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that plays podcasts. We are there. But that's it. Like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.